Lakeland Public Television's Common Ground is brought to you by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. Production funding for Common Ground is made possible by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. Hi, and welcome to this week's edition of Common Ground. Common Ground is a weekly series that highlights northern and central Minnesota culture. Each week, we'll explore the unique people, places, and events that are an important part of our region. Each week, Common Ground videographers, editors, and myself will take viewers on a journey of exploration into the worlds of art, history, and culture. This week, George and Marie Kueber share the history of the Two Inlets Saw Mill. Judith Selby, a watercolor artist from Bemidji, shares a technique that makes her paintings glow. And Tom Larson, a woodturner from Brainerd, turns a bowl for us, plus he shows us his vast collection of art.
I'm Judith Selby, and I'm a watercolor artist, and I'm going to show you my process today. The first thing I do is take my 140 or 300 pound paper. This is 300 Kilimanjaro paper, and I give it a bath. My technique is it's a saturated technique, so that still isn't enough water, even though I gave it a bath. That just got me started so that it was plenty wet on both sides so that it lays flat and I get the flow for the water. Water has a static quality. See how it sits right on top of the paper and doesn't move? But if you lightly move it, there's different amounts of reflection. What I try to do to keep the spontaneity of my water and my pigment is that I allow a lot of water to be over the whole surface so that the pigment can move naturally. Watercolor is so intriguing to me because when you've got the finished picture, there's no sign of the water. It's totally absent, but yet you have the path and the movement of the water and the pigment. One day, I had been at our cabin in Canada, and I was getting on the boat to get back to the mainland, and the painting I had in my hand, the wind blew into the lake. And everyone around thought, oh, how sad, it's ruined. And I grabbed the piece back out of the water, put it on a piece of masonite, and carried it home that way, soaking wet, and it dried in the car naturally. And I noticed that when I got done, when the paper finally dried, I had another stage up of the iridescence. So I've incorporated that into my process. I want the water to soak in and but still be that reflective mirror stage. These are watercolor pigments. I'm activating the colors. I use the most transparent paint I can find. I start with the lightest values first. I like to move around the paper at this stage. Another part of my process that evolved was how I paint. Instead of sitting, I'm usually standing and moving. After a car accident many years ago, I thought I wouldn't be able to paint anymore. And I had to adapt a way to be able to continue that. And I couldn't stand or sit in one spot because of a neck injury. So I just started working around the table and kept on moving. And now I can stay in one spot, but at the time I couldn't. So I've just incorporated that in because that has created a kind of effect that I like in my paintings. I have no preconceived notion about what I'm going to make this into yet. I'm just applying the color very randomly. It's spontaneous and random. As the pigments flow together, I begin to look for shapes to help me determine where I'm going to go with this. I like color. So I pretty much just start with the primaries and let them begin to complement each other. See, the blues start going into the greens. I paint from the heart and soul, so it's like just whatever happens, happens. The tipping part is really important for getting the different colors. And there's a lot of movement. A lot of times I end up with a lot of blue background, but in this one I'm just thinking I'm in a yellow mood, so I want to do some more yellow. It's so fun to just watch it change as it mingles. The 300-pound paper holds so much water that it just gives me more opportunity with this stage. With the lighter paper, it doesn't stay at the mirror stage this long. There's a couple dry spots. I don't know if you can see those, but I'm going to leave those because that'll add some texture. I rely on happy accidents and back bleeds and all the things you're not supposed to have in watercolor. I rely on them to help giving me inspiration on where I want to go. I still don't have any plan on what I'm actually going to paint. Sometimes I add a little bit of collage, some kind of rice paper that I'll pull apart, and that should absorb the color. See how it's pulling the color in? And it'll make interesting shapes, and we'll see what we get. Still working on randomness. I'm actually starting to see some umbrella shapes, so I'm applying some of this to kind of bring out the umbrella shape. I probably will pull this paper off when it dries, but it'll leave texture and shapes, and then I can build my project from that. And it'll keep on changing. I'm thinking about, not so much about what I'm going to make this into, but what I want the colors to be doing and where I want them to go, so I get the different values and some different mixtures of color. Like I want the turquoise to blend with the blue here, and I want some purple to do some blending over here. Now I'm going to demonstrate lifting. I need it in the matte stage. I need a thirsty brush, so I squeeze out my brush. I'm looking for shapes that I want to enhance. This is the first that I'm actually pushing my brush into the paper. The rag in there's 100% rag in the paper, and the rag works with the color and the water to get the colors I want. What I'm looking for here is I just want to start building some contrast from lights to darks in a few of the shapes. The pigment and the water in the paper now has gotten to the point where I have to leave it alone overnight. My focus isn't on the finished project. It's the process that I enjoy so much. I paint from my heart, not from my mind, and I allow the spontaneity of the elements working together in a natural way to achieve where I'm going with the paintings.
I'm Tom Larson, and this is my showroom of my studio. I'm in Brainerd, Minnesota, and I'm a woodturner. I've been doing this for about 16 years. I do it full time. This is my business. It's called Turning Trail. But normally I go to art shows across the country. I do Arts in the Park in Brainerd, though, by the way, and I've also done Bemidji art show in the summertime. But I've done a lot of shows in Minnesota, but I go all over the whole country. So to juried fine art fairs, and it's a pretty fun hobby. It's one of the funnest things I've ever did in my life. I had a pet shop in Brainerd for 32 years, and I started doing this in 1993. And I don't have the pet shop anymore, but I'm still doing this, and this is pretty fun. We just took this from the wood pile, and we're going to just cut this into a section. We're going to make a section about the same width as the diameter, and then we're going to make a natural edge bowl out of this. Okay, now we have a log that's the same diameter as it is width. Now I'm going to cut this piece in half. I'm going to cut it across the top like this, and then we're going to take the bowl out of the side of the piece, not out of the top of the round like that. So I'm going to just cut this right in half like so. The pith of the log, the center of the log, we don't want that in the log. This is the center of the log right here. We want that out of there. So this is the piece we're not going to use. This is the piece we're going to use, so that there's no center right here. I have all these different size circles made, so we'll put that right up on here. We can't saw it this way. We can't saw it upside down on the bandsaw like this. We can't draw a circle here because, like this, because when we start cutting it on the bandsaw, it wants to rip and roll that log. So what we want to do is put it on the top side, put a nail in here, like so, and then I will take it to the bandsaw, and I have a flat base on the bottom. So then I can just take this like this and roll around. All we're going to do is cut the corners off, so there's less work when we try to put it on the lathe, and we don't bang our tools every time we go around the corner, every time it spins around. That's all firewood. We'll put it in there. Now we have a circle. We have a piece of wood. The bowl, this is going to be the top of the bowl. This is going to be the bottom of the bowl. So this is, we call this a natural edge piece. It will have the bark on it. We could make it the other way, have this at the top, and it would be a natural bowl. But I choose to do a natural edge piece this time because it's kind of cool. And it looks kind of like an oblong piece when we get it done. When I cut the circle, I put that nail in here. That was the center of my piece. So now I'm going to take this drive center here and put that right on that hole where the nail was. Bash it in there with my homemade club that you see is very well used. And what I'm going to do there is put that here. And then I'm going to take this piece and I'm going to put it into this unit and tighten it up. I could put it right into the headstock, right into the Morse taper, but I can also use it in this chuck. Now I can take this piece here. This is the tailstock. We put it up there, and we would put that not only for safety, but because you have to have it between centers so I can shape it. People always ask, how fast do you go? I go as fast as I can. But if you see the lathe start to shimmy or start to shake, I turn it back down when it gets that speed because it's too fast. I'm going to check it now and see where we're at. Just about exactly right. Across from each other, should balance just a little bit more this way. So, because I want the sides to be even up on each side. So we'll move that over, retighten it. Now I'm going to put a dovetail on the bottom because I want to be able to hold this bowl in my chuck. 2 dovetails on there in case I break one, but also for visual reference. I use that. I have 2 of them. I have a visual reference so I don't go through the bottom when I finish. And these 2 have to be pretty accurate and pretty smooth because this is what is going to control how much wobble there is when I turn it around. This, by the way, is a black ash bowl. This tree was 165 years old. We just counted the rings when we took it down. It came from about 4 foot in front of my shop right here. So now I'm going to shape it a little bit more. You can't really see what you're cutting. Looks like you're looking at an airplane propeller that's going around and around. So you just kind of like cut what you can see. There we go. Now we have a nice round, pretty much round ball with wings on it. Shape that up just a little bit. We're going to put this in the kiln to dry it after we get through finish roughing it all out. There's lots of ways to dry balls, but the best way is either air dry them or I put them in a little refrigerator kiln and let them dry with a 100-watt bulb, or a 25-watt bulb, and is about 100 degrees. Here's the center of my piece. I'm going to make a little pilot hole. Make a hole about like that. Now I'm going to make a depth hole. I'm going to take a drill bit and I'm going to measure the depth of this, how deep I want to go. And I want to go about right there for the bottom. So I will go right to there and I will go in that far on the edge of the bark. I want to turn this on and I'm just going to handle this with just by my hand, and I'm going to stick it in there like that and keep pulling out to keep it cleaned out. See, this way when I get to the center, it just stops the chisel. If I went across, it would go kick back like that. So that's where I want the bottom to be. Now I'm going to take a wood scraper, a bowl scraper. I'm going to come in here like this. Okay, this bowl is done. It's all roughed out. It's ready to put in the kiln or to put in a place to let it dry. And it should dry for, like I said, in a kiln maybe a month. Otherwise on the floor or in a paper bag or something, maybe up to a year's time before you can turn it and return it again. This is about 3/4 of an inch thick. When we have a finished bowl, it will probably be about 3/16 to a 1/4 inch. But anyway, now I can take this off the lathe and I can I'll seal the ends here. I'll seal this with a green wood sealer, which is a wax-based finish, and I'll seal this right here. And then I will put it in my refrigerator kiln over there and leave it set. This is the kiln. All it is an old refrigerator with some holes drilled in the bottom and on top, and a 25-watt light bulb in here. If it's a great big refrigerator, you need a 40-watt light bulb. So you have around temperature around 97 to 100 degrees, and stuff just sits in here, and within a month's time it'll all be dry. But that's the cheapest kiln that you can find right now. This is the showroom in here. These are pieces that are done and ready for me to take off. I'm going to art show next week in Scottsdale, Arizona, and Fountain Hills, and this stuff will all be gone out of here next week. The wood doesn't have to come from a long ways away to be pretty. You can get it from almost anywhere, but you want to find a piece of wood that's got some character, a crotch piece or a burl piece, or a piece of the tree is all wavy or something. Just straight grain lumber, straight grain wood is not really very pretty, but it could be very functional, but it's not very pretty, you know. Stuff is endless. I mean, you can make anything, and you just have a little bit of creative ability to think about something, and you take a round piece and you make it into something that's round but still different. And that's the hard part, is trying to figure out how many more different ones you can make. Okay. You know. And then you want to make them as best as you can make them. You want to make them with a nice finish. They need to feel good. They need to be kind of balanced. At least that's what I pride myself in doing, is the best I can do with every piece of what I put on the lathe. So I always like a challenge of some sort, you know. And I always challenge myself to see if I can make something better and faster. I have this faster thing, I need to make it fast, but actually fast doesn't mean anything, because you can make the same piece slow, you know. It's just that I like to do things as fast as I do them and still do them good. If you can't do them good, then I don't want to do them fast. You know. I think the best part of this hobby is you can create a piece in one evening or in one afternoon or in one day. So you kind of get instant gratification. It's like, wow, I did this. I made this in one day, or I made this in 2 hours, or whatever it takes you to make. It is something cool. You don't sit and wait for glue to dry. You're not making a cabinet, which takes weeks. You have that accomplishment, the sense of accomplishment right away. And when you put that first coat of finish on it, you say, whoa, look at this. Is this ever cool, you know? And then you set it aside and start another one. And that's what's nice about it, what I like about it anyway. It's you don't have to have a lot of patience to wait for things. You just get it done.
I was born in North Dakota, and we moved out there on number 4. I went to Bemidji. I mean partly to school at yeah, Emerville. Built a log house, and of course we moved right when you couldn't afford to move. In other words, he didn't have enough money to finish the job. Anyway, the house caught fire and burnt down, and we lost it for taxes. One thing went from there to the other. The mill, the mill that started here started by itself. It was a water power mill. They turned it, turn of the century. They had a water power mill going. They sawed, I guess whenever in the spring of the year, the normal, whatever the logging procedures called for. Well, we done things in them days. They weren't very careful on whether they wasted a log or not. Well, like me now, there's one thing I done here that wouldn't fit in with the rest of them. I decided I was going to raise a family here, so I had to make myself work for the year round.
Like I say, we've been neighbors, and we just, I don't know, one thing led to another, and all of a sudden we decided it's time to get married, so we've been married 56 years this past fall. And at times I used to wonder, are we going to make it? Well, he started the first of it in 1966 when we lived over on the other place, and then we bought the farm here and moved it over here and went into partnership, and it just kind of took off.
Oh yeah, I was going to say that what I had to do is figure out a way to make a year run a year. Now that sounds kind of stupid, but in the spring of the year you got road breakup. If you're in the logging business, there's nothing for you to do. You can't haul anything, well, beyond a few stakes. So I got this old mill there to keep me busy, but you didn't ever know. When I wanted to run it was somewhere around the 1st of April, somewhere, because I wanted to feel popular the rest of the time. I had to do something for it when the road breakup was on. Outside of that, it took care of itself. But when the road breakup was on, then I had to figure out something to do. What I done is I got this old mill. Pete and John had it. You don't know Pete and John, but they lived up in the northwest corner of the prairie. They had a steam engine, and they had this old mill that they cobbled up. I bought that. I didn't need a big, it was an old-time mill. All I needed to do was serve from road closing until road opening. If you could tell me that year after year, I could have, some years, not even started it. But then I don't know when that's going to be. Later on, we bought the planters so we could plane lumber and sell it completely done. We bought that in later years. Henry Ford, that came out of his factory at one time. That planer we got back there, that was one of his planers that was in his factory in Michigan. Back when they still made car wheels.
Out of wood?
Out of wood. Well, whenever I was at the mill peeling popple, that was the main thing. You could sell all the peeled wood that you could sell, that you could make. I could peel wood all summer, and it all had a sale. And them days, probably the big important thing was sales. You had to sell it. If you couldn't sell it, it was no good to you.
Well, we started the mill first, and it was quite a few years later that we built the planer shed and then put in the planer, because our sawyer loves to tinker, and he has rebuilt the mill, and he's put in a lot of improvements, and he's even put in a wood chopper that chops the slab wood. And he's very good at what he does. So no, it's much improved. Well, in what, 66 till 90 or 09, that's a lot of years. It was, at times it was kind of tough. I mean, because, you know, market was unvariable, and times it was kind of tough, but you figured out what was most important. And we put 3 kids through college, and the other 2 said they always went to the School of Hard Knocks. But no, our kids have done well. Yeah, very proud of them.
Thank you so much for joining us. We hope that you enjoyed tonight's show, and we look forward to seeing you next week right here on Common Ground. If you have a segment idea for Common Ground, please contact us at legacy@lptv.org or call us at 218-333-3022. Individual segments or copies of Common Ground, please call 218-333-3020. Production funding for Common Ground is made possible by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. If you enjoyed this segment of Lakeland Public Television's Common Ground, consider making a contribution at lptv.org.